If you're like me, you probably have quite a few spools of 3D printer filaments that are just laying around and don't have enough filament left to really make a complete print. So they're just taking up space in your shop. Today, I'm going to show you a solution by comparing the new Sunlu filament connector to the VIT filament connector, and I'm going to address if you even need one of these connectors. Number 2, the ease of use of them. Number 3, their performance. Number 4, the cost. And number 5, I'm going to describe to you an automated filament rewinder and rainbow filament option as a bonus. Hi, I'm Ken of Risk Innovations, and I bought the VIT filament connector with my own money. And I wanted to thank Sunlu for sending me their newly launched filament connector. There have already been a number of recent YouTube reviews, especially for the new Sunlu filament connector. So I'm going to provide you with some very useful information that hasn't been addressed yet in the other video. So let's get started. So many people have commented on the other YouTube videos that they don't even need a filament connector because number 1, they will rely on their filament runout sensor to tell them when they are out of filament and just resume the print by adding a new spool of filament. Or number 2, some people have the Bamboo Lab AMS or AMS Lite, which is their automatic material system, and that will automatically load a new spool of filament if a previous spool of the same filament runs out. Although the filament runout sensor and the Bamboo Lab AMS Lite will allow you to load new spools of filament if you run out, if you are printing parts where the cosmetic quality is critical, then these filament connectors could increase your chances of printing a higher quality part. Let me explain further. In my first 2 tests on my Bamboo Lab A1 Mini, I let the filament run out and then I loaded a new spool and continued on with the print. I printed the cylinder designed by Apartapolo 11 in MakerWorld in the vase mode, which means you have a single wall thickness. You can see that there are defects caused by the pausing of the printer. Next, I used the AMS Lite with the Bamboo Lab A1 Mini, and I allowed one spool of filament to run out, and the AMS Lite automatically moved to the second spool. Also in this case, there are defects on the part where the second spool started. Now, I realize that parts aren't normally printed in the vase mode, so for parts with multiple walls, there's a good chance that the prints will hide this defect as long as the filament transition is in the interior section of the part. But if your part's cosmetic appearance is critical, then you may want to consider using a filament connector. If you have a 3D printing need, but you don't have a 3D printer, I have the solution for you. That brings me to the sponsor of today's video, PCBWay. If you are working on any prototype projects, they can help you when you need a variety of parts. Besides making PCBs, they also offer CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication, injection molding, and lots of different types of 3D printing, including metal printing. This is a special time for PCBWay because they are currently celebrating their 10th anniversary. So they have many different sales going on right now. You just need to go on their website, upload your design, select the material and quantity, and you'll get an instant quote. Then they will manufacture the parts and ship them right to your door. Give them a try, and I think you'll be amazed at what they can do for you. I have a link in the description below. Now let's talk about the ease of use of the Sunlu and VIT filament connectors. The Sunlu filament connector is a well-designed compact unit. It comes with a USB cord, but not a plug. So you have to make sure you provide a plug that is rated for at least 2 amps. My iPhone plugs were only rated at 1 amp. I had to buy a plug especially for the Sunlu. It also comes with 200 pieces of these 26mm long thin-walled Teflon tubing pieces that I will talk more about in a minute. You can choose different presettings for PLA, ABS, PETG, nylon, and PCL, so it has very precise temperature control. You can also adjust the preset temperatures up or down. The key to the performance of the Sunlu filament connector is the disposable Teflon tubing pieces. The Teflon tubing helps align the filament ends and it holds them in place while you load the filaments into the filament connector. To prepare the filament ends, cut each end at an angle to form a scarf joint. This will give you more surface area to bond the 2 filaments together. Slightly rotate the filaments so the scarf joint matches, and then place into the filament connector and push the lever down. Then, ever so slightly, apply pressure to both ends of the filament to help with the bonding. After a few seconds, you'll hear a beep, so it's time to remove the filament, so push down on the latch. Next, carefully remove the filament assembly from the connector and allow it to cool. Now, you need to remove the Teflon tubing, so snap it into the slot above the heated area and close the lid. There's a small blade that will score the Teflon tubing, but not cut the filament. Remove the filament from the connector and gently peel away the Teflon tubing. The Teflon tubing is disposable and can't be reused. I'll show you the results of making a part using the spliced filament in a minute. But let's first talk about the VIT filament connector. The VIT filament connector comes with a power cord that plugs directly into an AC wall outlet. It also comes with a timer. The VIT filament connector has a very strong spring, so it takes some force to open up the jaws of the connector. And you really need 3 hands to operate this thing. So I designed and 3D printed this base plate, and I added 4 threaded inserts. Then I drilled 4 clearance holes into the VIT filament connector, and I mounted it to the base plate, and then I clamped the assembly onto my workbench. This made it much easier to operate the VIT filament connector. The instructions said to turn on the filament connector and wait approximately 2.5 minutes. Then to turn it off and insert the filament ends. It will heat up to a maximum temperature of approximately 220 degrees C. Because I couldn't see inside the clamp, I cut the ends of the filaments perpendicular to form a butt joint. VIT recommends to open the jaws and insert 1 filament into the connector and close the jaws. Then they recommend to insert the other filament end while the jaws are closed and push both filaments towards each other. The problem is that you are blind to what you are doing, so it's not easy to determine if you're making contact with both filaments. Then they recommend for you to allow the connector to cool down for about 4 to 5 minutes before you open the clamp to remove the filaments. When I opened up the clamp, there was a lot of flashing of filament that I needed to trim with a scalpel blade, and then I needed to sand the joint because it was so irregular. I also tried an experiment using the Sunlu Teflon tubing, and I inserted the filaments into the VIT filament connector, which actually worked out quite well because it eliminated the need to do the post-processing because there wasn't any flashing compared to using the VIT filament connector without the Teflon tubing. Now, let's see the performance of both connectors by printing some parts. This part was printed using the Sunlu PLA filaments and the Sunlu filament connector, and it turned out flawless at the fused joint. I also joined some Bamboo Lab AMS filament using the Sunlu filament connector, and that also turned out flawless at the fused joint. In fact, due to the vase mode, it turned out really cool how it took several layers to transition from the black to the red color. Now this part was printed using the Sunlu PLA filaments and the VIT filament connector, and it turned out quite well. The downside is it took me a long time to sand down the filament joint due to all the flashing before I could load the filament into the printer. Now let's talk cost. The Sunlu filament connector has a pre-sale cost of $34.99, which includes the standard quantity of 200 Teflon tubes. Normally this would cost $44.99, but it's on sale between now and August 14th of 2024. The VIT filament connector has a standard price of $47.99. I came up with a simple scoring system from 1 to 5, with 1 being poor and 5 being excellent. So let's see how the 2 connectors stack up. Feature number 1, temperature control. The Sunlu has a very precise preset temperature, so I give that a score of a 5. For the VIT, there's no temperature control other than maxing out at 230 degrees C, so I give that a score of a 1. For ease of operation, the Sunlu's Teflon tubing allows easy alignment of the filament to be able to place it into the connector. I give the Sunlu a score of a 5. For the VIT, it's very difficult to see the filament alignment, so I give the VIT a score of a 2. For cycle time for the Sunlu, there's a fast heat up and in less than 10 seconds to join the parts, and the filament cools within a minute. I give the Sunlu a score of a 4. For the VIT, it takes 2.5 minutes to heat up and 4 to 5 minutes to cool down. So because of the length of time, I give the VIT a score of a 1. For post-processing the Sunlu, you just have to cut the Teflon tubing using the connector and remove the tubing, so it's very simple. So I give the Sunlu a score of a 5. For the VIT, you have to trim all of that flash and sand the joint smooth, and it's quite irregular, which takes a while, so I give the VIT a score of a 1. For the print quality performance, for the Sunlu, for the PLA and ABS, the joints were really flawless, so I give the Sunlu a score of a 5. For the VIT, for the PLA sample that I made, it did print quite well, so I give the VIT a score of a 4. For the cost of the Sunlu, there is a pre-sale cost that includes 200 filament tubing pieces at $34.99, normally at $44.99. So I give the Sunlu a score of a 4. The standard price of the VIT is $47.99, so I give the VIT a score of a 3. When you total all the points up, the Sunlu total is 28 points, and the VIT total is only 12 points. So the Sunlu filament connector is definitely a clear winner. Based on these results, this is a no-brainer that the Sunlu filament connector blows the doors off the VIT filament connector. The Sunlu's ease of use, precise temperature control, and the disposable Teflon tubing pieces are key to the performance of the Sunlu filament connector. Some people aren't thrilled with the Teflon tubing pieces, but in my mind, they are a clever solution to keep the filament aligned, and the tubing eliminates flashing and other post-processing that the VIT filament connector requires. And at approximately 4 cents per Teflon tubing piece, I consider that to be well worth it to avoid the post-processing hassles. If you are interested in buying one of the Sunlu filament connectors, I have an affiliate link in the description below. If you use the link, there won't be any additional cost to you, and Sunlu will provide me with a small commission, which will really help me to be able to make more videos. Now, let's talk about the automated filament spool rewinder and the rainbow filament option. Since you may be joining two spools that have a fair amount of filament on them, you need to find a way to quickly wind the filament from the smaller spool to the spool with the larger amount of filament, so I have a solution for you. I built this automated filament spool rewinder from the original design by Miklos Kisley and 2 remixes by Bird2Brain and Diplomator, all on printables. Links in the description below. I cover my build of the automated filament spool rewinder in another one of my videos titled The 10 Best Upgrades for Your Bambu Lab 3D Printer, and that link is in the description below. Another feature to mention is that you can make your own multicolor filament by splicing different colors of the same material onto a filament spool. My next video will be the best 3D printed tools, and when that video is available, that link will be here. In the meantime, you may want to watch my most popular video to date, which has over 300,000 views, and it's the 10 best upgrades for your Bambu Lab printer, because I go into details on the automated spool rewinder, and that link is here. Thanks for watching. Bye!